I'm Jagger, and this is my AS evaluation. So after creating my film opening and pre-production research, I created a presentation evaluating how my media product challenges real media products, the representation of particular social groups, what kind of media institution would distribute my film, the audience for my media product, how to direct my audience, and what I've learned about technologies in the process of creating my film. Finally, how my skills have improved since my preliminary task. So this is the first frame from my product. This shows my film's independent and unconventional as it's funded and distributed by Film. The second frame illustrates my production is not a Hollywood conventional opening with action, but rather a slow, thought-provoking piece, as we are allowed to think who the character is. And it also introduces the character as lonely and quiet. Costume shows individuality, as it's got a grunge kind of style, and I have a pan to assert her importance in the story as the main character. My third frame shows that this is also not conventional, as it's not symbolic with kind of like reds for roses, and the road reflects the fact that Esme is on a journey of learning how to express love and a journey to adulthood. I used a time lapse in this to speed it up and show that this is a dangerous and fast journey, and furthermore it's a high overseeing shot which mirrors the fact that we are bystanders and we're watching over her story rather than point of view shots where we are in the story. The fourth frame is possibly more conventional shot because it's a natural beauty which could be used in a romance, but it's a juxtaposition in my romance story as the love for them is not natural. However, the sunset reflects progression in the relationship as the sunset progresses. The fifth frame is an unconventional shot to a romance, as Esme is alone, yet she's still a strong character. So this reflects how she doesn't stick to the female stereotype. She's also anonymous to the viewer, which reflects how she's hard to understand by Tris. This is a middle shot to show that we're not supposed to be intimidated by Esme. The sixth shot is quite similar to the previous one. It's also distinguishable from a Hollywood romance, as the characters are shown separately and we know little information about him, which reflects that Esme cannot understand him. The seventh frame is a unique way of presenting titles, which was inspired by Napoleon Dynamite. I use this as it's more exciting than fade-in titles, and it appeals to my audience as it uses products such as the vinyl, and it shows Esme's interest in music. The eighth frame is Doc Martens, which are known for being grunge, and so this highlights Esme's style, and the font is handwritten to show Esme is a rough cut and messy character. And the final frame is unconventional, as it uses a low angle, giving Esme power over the viewer as she's higher, and it's not typical for a female stereotype. Inspirations for my media piece. My first inspiration was Napoleon Dynamite, who uses food items to display the titles, whereas I use things like vinyls, beer bottles and Doc Martens. So again, this appeals to the target audience, as it's far more interesting and keeps them engaged in the piece. The second inspiration was Submarine. This inspired my nature shots, and it uses a monologue and car music to aid the clip's emotive effect, as I tried to do with my piece. My original idea was to create my silhouette shots as shown below. However, due to the weather, this wasn't possible, so I did them indoors with sheets. Character comparison. And this is Oliver Tate from the film Submarine. And I'm comparing him to Tristan from my product. So his clothes are very formal, and so he subverbs a teenage stereotype and takes pride in his appearance. Furthermore, opposing this, his hair is messy, so he conforms more to the female teenage stereotype. He wears mostly dark clothing in a sense of formality, and more that he may stick to the rules. This is Tris from my product. He dresses more conventionally for a teenage boy, opposing Oliver. And he has a far friendlier appearance, and he's more approachable. The characters are similar as they're both young males who are intelligent and emotional. They're emotional in different ways, however, as Tris is emotional in a relationship, whereas Oliver is more empathetic towards people in the story. And they both fall for a girl who's not particularly interested in them. They're different as Oliver is colder, and Tris seeks conventional romance, he is a hopeless romantic, and he's more approachable. This is Juno McGuff from the film Juno, and I'll be comparing her with my character Esme Adams. So she doesn't stick to the film stereotype, as she has unkept hair and no makeup or overdressing. She keeps a neutral emotion and also doesn't look approachable. Furthermore, she dresses subverting expectations and female stereotypes, as does my character Esme, shown here. Again, neutral emotion. However, she does oppose the character of Juno a little more, as she has better kept hair and wears more makeup, reflecting that she possibly conforms at times. So they're both young teens who are independent, so they do not stick to the stereotype of females. However, they're not interested in romance. Both interested in music and are expressive and don't care for others' opinions. Juno is more interested in males in a sexual relationship, whereas Esme becomes accustomed to romance, and Juno feels pregnant in this. This is my company logo. I went for the name Freewheeling as I looked through researching synonyms of independence, as I really want to assert an independent company with my name. The logo also asserts movement from conventional romance films, as it's quite different. So I used a penny farthing as it's old-fashioned and matched the title as Irreconcilable Love. I used the cow head as it's strange, but it foreshadows that the couple in my film are not suited for each other, like a cow would be on a penny farthing. I tried to make the logo as eccentric as possible to convey the unconventional reference. So a production company typically manages staff, budgeting, scheduling, scripting, put in charge of resources, the production itself, distribution and marketing. A company is either owned or under contract for a larger parent company. Some mainstream companies would be 20th Century Fox, independent would be Lionsgate, and a complete independent company could be Working Titles. I decided to fund my film as it supports indie films and has supported films similar to mine, such as Submarine and many romances in the 90s. It can be hard for independent films to get noticed as they don't have stars or famous directors. However, through my research I found that people care about directors' names less recently, and so Film 4 would be good as it distributes films on the television, getting the actor and director's names known. I could also use companies such as Kickstarter and UK Film Council, who also support independent films. So my title was rolled as shown. First was Esme, as she's the main character, and I used the word introducing, as she's clearly not a distinguished or known actor, so this would be an introducing film for her. I used Tris second, as he's the main character's boyfriend, and he's also just shown as introducing, as he's not famous. Put the director second next to the title, as it's one of the most important jobs, and it's conventionally shown very close to the end. And then I showed the title last, so it reinforces the name to the audience. I believe my film would be a 12, as it would have moderate violence and discreet sexual reference. However, those wouldn't be shown, as that would make it a 15 or an 18. It's clearly not a U, as it's not aimed at people around the age of 4+, and it has subtle references to sex, drugs and violence. It will not be a PG, as it does not display sex, drugs and violence in a deterring way, as mentioned in the BBFC guidelines. My target audience. So this could be somewhat typical of my target audience, as he is around the age of 15 to 20. He would be interested in shows such as American Horror Story and The Walking Dead, which is typical to a teenage boy. However, when interviewing him, I found he also enjoys programs such as Pretty Little Liars and The Vampire Diaries, which you may link more to a teenage girl. He'd listen to music such as 21 Pilots, Fall Out Boy, or Turn Learn, Panic at the Disco. These are all rock bands who would not typically be listened to by the majority of teens. Furthermore, his interests could be niche interests such as photography and rollerblading. He's interested in listening to music, as previously mentioned, and things like Instagram. Furthermore, he'd shop at conventional shops such as Top Man and H&M, or possibly independent shops such as Drop Dead, which is managed by a rock star. So in my piece, I aim to oppose conventions. I was inspired by Napoleon Dynamite, which uses food items, which obviously opposes conventions, and we find comfort in prior knowledge of the character. This appeals to a wider audience, I feel, in contrast to Submarine, where the opening appeals to the target audience through simplicity, and it's not complicated. So it establishes the main character and settings, but it appeals to teens as a teenager does the voiceover. So my film will not stick to the convention romance films normally stick to, of getting to know the protagonist, meeting the potential lover with a period of rising tension, then a large mistake and a breakup, and a dramatic get-together. My storyline is a lot different to that, as May starts to realise she cannot wish people away her whole life, and slowly falls for Tris as he falls out of love with her. So I believe this is a unique selling point, because the characters develop opposite feelings. And this film is independent, so it does not aim to make a bold statement with special effects and action, but an emotional influence and simplicity. So the technology I used the Nikon D33 00. It has HD video, and then I experimented with manual focus to create blurred shots, and the autofocus for the rest of my shots. It has an 18 to 55mm lens, and it's a 24 megapixel camera. I used a tripod to stabilise my shots and also to film pans. It has extendable legs, so depending on what shot I want to film and what I want to get in it, I would extend it. And then to create my silhouette shots, I used the frame of green screen with a white sheet and halogen bulb behind it. It turned out that the bulb wasn't quite strong enough, so I changed that in the editing process. The technologies I used. So I used Blogger to create my online portfolio, YouTube to upload all of my videos that I created, Google Drive is a safe way to store and share my files, Adobe to edit it, Timetoast to track my progression and time management, and then Prezi as a more interesting way of displaying my ideas. Development of skills. So with editing, I create in comparison to my preliminary task. This flowed a lot easier with additive dissolves, even with a range of locations. I feel like it had a lot more fluidity than the preliminary task, which was all jump cuts. I used a lot more sound in my piece, and it has split narration, so I had to make sure the parts split and fit to each clip. In the preliminary, we had to use things such as match on action, which I didn't use in my own thing, as it didn't use much action. It was rather capturing emotions through scenery. We also used the 180-degree rule and match on actions for dialogue. I didn't need this again in my actual piece because there was no dialogue, because it was all narration. I tried to use more interesting shots than always constant middle shots. So for this shot I used a low angle to create dramatic effect of the reflection in the water, and it's quite an important perspective as this is only a puddle, but I feel like the shot made it look more dramatic as it was low and captured it more like a lake. I used shots such as this which were not level or centred, which was disconcerting, so it reflects Esme and Triss's complicated feelings for each other. In this shot I experimented with manual focus and used pull shots, which we did not do in the preliminary. Again, this shows complicated feelings, and it shows improvement for an increased knowledge of cameras. I display people quite differently in my preliminary and my actual media product. As the preliminary, you're showing the person and it allows you to make a judgment from her appearance and her speech, whereas in mine, you create your own character in your head before you see him, as all you get is the silhouette. The last shot I'm talking about is a time lapse. I use this to vary speed in my opening and so to create more interesting opening. We didn't use this in the preliminary, we just used standard speed and crosscuts. So in my final piece there was a lot longer screen time as there was no action, so I feel like this allows appreciation of the scenery and it creates an emotive effect. Point of view shots were not used as you're an overseer of the story rather than a participant, and there was no extreme long shots as I feel it gives you a closer connection with the characters. Pre-production, I aimed to go to different locations such as Panama Beach. Due to the weather I couldn't do things such as that, so I had to film my silhouette shots indoors. I also didn't achieve the aerial shots I talked about in my pre-production plans as it was too windy. So in summary, I attempted to create an independent romance with relatable characters and simplicity to give an emotive effect.